Welcome, everybody. We're happy to share our adventure. Everybody has asked us, why on earth did you go to the Northern Lights in the middle of winter to Alaska? Well, for 13 plus years, Glenn and I have traveled around the world, mostly to get his 63 national parks. And he got those a few years ago, and now it's my turn. And if any of you have read the book that I wrote, you know that I'm known for unique adventures. Something no one else would do, that's what I will do. Those are the vacations I have taken before I met up with Glenn. And seeing the Northern Lights has always been on my wish list. And it certainly fits the bill for uniqueness, don't you think? I've been mentally preparing for this trip since my very first time in Alaska, when we were there in June, the very beginning of June, when we had 24-hour sunlight. This is totally the opposite of that. Go for it, Glenn.
Am I supposed to be saying something?
No,
Okay.
been planning.
Okay.
So this is the very beginning. We watched for the temperatures in Alaska for probably months before we left. And we were told it was going to be about minus 35 degrees. But we figured that's fine. You know, we'll wear a lot of clothes, we'll dress warmly. But we had no idea how cold it was going to be, how cold it was. And we left Pittsburgh at 6:30 p.m., February 1st. And this is the scene from our plane as we flew out of Pittsburgh. We arrived in Fairbanks, 3 o'clock a.m. Fairbanks time, which is about 8 o'clock Pittsburgh time. So how do you think we dressed and prepared for this trip? Well, I'm going to tell you how we packed. We carried 4 suitcases. And in one suitcase, we had all of this material. We had 2 pair of boots for each one of us. That's 4 pair of boots. Balaclavas, and Glenn's going to show you how to put on a balaclava. We had wool scarves, hats, heavy gloves, 2 pairs of mittens, heavy wool socks, lots and lots of heavy wool socks, hiking poles for each of us, hand and foot warmers, and we have plenty left over if you plan on going to Alaska in the winter. We'll give you some. Flannel long johns, of which I wore several pair each day. And my Nanook coat, which is over there, and you have to come up and look at my Nanook of the North coat after it's over to see how heavy it is. So I wore that coat plus all the layers. And this was for each of us in addition to our regular packing.
This is pretty much how we look. She had a similar one. And this is pretty much how we looked every time we went outside. You know, also the coats and the long johns and everything, but you had to really protect your head and your breathing. And when you exhale in this, it kind of warms this part so that when you inhale your next breath, it's a little bit warmed from the outside temperature. So you're exhaling and this warms up, and you're inhaling and it gets cold. But this way you're not breathing exactly minus 55 degree temperatures.
Right.
Because believe me, your lung says, I'm not breathing that.
And that was the underlayer. On top of that, we had our hats and several hats on top of that.
Okay.
So Glenn, here.
All right. So we get into Fairbanks at what's Pittsburgh time, 8 o'clock in the morning, although it's 3 o'clock there.
3 o'clock in the morning.
And like Masonic, the Fairbanks Airport had double layer doors. You know, like we have, you open, the first one opens and you go in and it closes. Okay, so on the outer door of the double layer, the inside of the outer door, there was about a ½ inch of ice. And on the inner door, the outside of the inner door, there was about a ½ inch of ice. So that little area between the 2 doors was bitter cold, and that's not even the outside temperature, just the area there. So we put on as much as we could put on, just literally to walk across the street to get into the van that was going to take us to the hotel. It was just a shock to the system. And the driver said, well, you folks are not used to this kind of temperature, so you want to avoid, you know, being outside as much as possible, no more than 5 or 10 minutes at the most. And it's 55 degrees. And sure enough, when we were driving in, there was a sign on the bank that said temperature negative 55 degrees. Now, I really wanted to find one that was close enough to the ground so we could stand in front of it and get the picture, but I couldn't find one that low, and I wasn't about to climb to the top of the bank. So you just have to take our word that it was 55 degrees there.
Minus 55.
Minus 55, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is a view of the, from our 4th floor room in the hotel down onto a little strip mall across the street. That's all ice there. All of those cars are parked there. What you can't see is that they all have an electric plug sticking out from the engine, which plugs into the
Electrical outlet.
electrical outlets that are alongside the stores at the strip mall, because you have to keep the engine warm so you can start your cars in the morning. So, it's not going to help.
No, don't worry about it.
So that's what we got. Now, we also got up at 9:30 because they stopped serving breakfast at the hotel at 9:30. And we had to get down there and get our oatmeal and what have you. And so you'll see it's still relatively, it's still relatively dark there. The sun didn't come up till about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it was dark again by 4, so there was only about 6 hours of daylight early in February.
That's what I...
Oh, okay, and yeah, we found I'm not going fast enough for her at this. We found a mural on the side of one of the buildings that said Fairbanks. So I thought, let's take a picture of that so people actually believe us that we were there.
Maureen, you had a question.
I didn't get the month.
Oh, we were February 1st
Oh.
of this year. Okay. So this is something we saw throughout Alaska while we were there. And ice is called ice fog. We looked out our window and it looked like there was a building on fire and there was smoke coming out, but it wasn't moving. And we were flummoxed by this. We learned later that it's ice fog. And ice fog is most common in the interior and northern Alaska, and it only takes formation under very specific conditions. The humidity has to be near 100%, and the air temperature has to be below minus 30 degrees. It's a very rare and unique combination not seen anywhere outside of Arctic climates, and it's extremely rare in Fairbanks. In fact, like the ice fog we saw, we were very lucky. It's the first the Fairbankers had seen it in almost 10 years because the air was finally cold enough for a long enough period of time. So we hit the right time just to see ice fog.
Did you walk through that ice fog?
Oh, we absolutely did, yes. We walked right through it. And in some of the pictures, you'll see that it's just, you'd think we were in the middle of nighttime and it was just that fog. And it was just static, just there. So Fairbanks, keep in mind, was just a layover. We were going to be there a day and a half. And so the second morning we decided, what on earth are we going to do? So we just, at the front desk, they told us, absolutely do not go out and walk. So what did we do? We hired an Uber driver to take us to the University of Alaska Museum of the North. And to get both Glenn and I, we thought a car would come pick us up, an Uber driver, right? Well, what came to pick us up was this huge, humongous truck, as you see the back of it here. And to get us into the back seat of the truck, she pulled out a ladder about this high. We had to get up on the ladder to get into the back seat of the truck. So Glenn, why don't you take over here?
Oh, yes. Before we left, Carolyn Rock asked me, what kind of animals do you expect to see? And I said, well, we're not going to see any bears because they'll be hibernating, but we might see some caribou. And when we got there, we discovered that the University of Alaska at Fairbanks had something called a large animal research station. About 100 acres of fenced in double fenced areas where they had musk oxen and they had caribou. So I asked the Uber driver, the woman, to drive us by that road, and sure enough, there were some musk oxen right up alongside the road. So she stopped for us, but there was a double fence, and I couldn't get any pictures through the two fences of the musk oxen. So
In the meantime, Uber driver and I are talking, and Glenn's out looking for birds and animals and all of the nature, and I talk to the people, to the natives. So she and I are talking, and she looks at him, and she looks at me, and she says, this isn't working, get back in the truck. So we hopped in the truck, she backs the truck up to the fence, and we try to help Glenn get into the truck so that he can, the back of the truck, so that he can take a picture of these musk oxens. And I have another picture of him trying to get into the truck, and I promised him I wouldn't show it. But this is what he was trying to take pictures of.
you could have seen in the previous picture, I was over the first fence, so I had a much better shot at taking the
What
picture.
is that animal? What is it?
It's a musk oxen,
Oh,
M-U-S-K-O-X-E-N.
musk oxen.
Sometimes you see them on nature shows. They are in the cow family, very small
I see.
cow, and sometimes they'll form a protective barrier around the young ones with the heads facing out with those big horns there. And so I was over the first fence, so I had a better shot, and I got some of these pictures of them, including the northbound end of a southbound musk oxen. But anyway, that was the best shot I could get.
So here is our establishing shot of the University of Alaska Museum of the North. And we could regale you with lots of pictures and lots of stories about what's in the museums, but you're here to see the Northern Lights. So we'll just show you one or two pictures. But the one thing we did do is at the museum, we watched a video about the history of the Northern Lights, and which was really fascinating. And Glenn's going, this is just a very brief how the Northern Lights are formed. Glenn?
Yes, what we saw and what most people see under normal sunlight conditions are the greens, which is here. They go up to 150 miles above the surface of the earth. If you get extremely active solar flares and what have you, it will form this reddish color on the oxygen that's higher, in this case above 150 miles above the surface of the earth. You'll see the red. We didn't see much of that. We saw a little bit maybe, but not really intense. And then lower down, 60 miles or so, up to 60 miles, you have greater concentration of nitrogen in the atmosphere, which gives you this blues or purples. That's under 150 miles. I don't know, did anyone see the Northern Lights when they were here about a month and a half ago? No, we didn't either.
Well, the people that did see them saw mostly the green, which is pretty much what we saw in Alaska.
That's almost what you almost normally see, except in rare instances when you have extremely high solar activity.
Right. So here are a couple pictures. These are not ones that we saw. These were during the video at the museum, but just a couple. You can see what Glenn was talking about, the blue and purple, the green, and then the red at the top. And this is broad daylight, the 5 or 6 hours that we actually saw the sun. And these were my glasses. These were my glasses, frozen, so I really couldn't wear my glasses the whole time we were there.
Outside, anyway.
outside, right? This is the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center. Now, remember I told you we were warned not to go out? And if we did, we were not to go out for more than a couple of minutes. Well, we didn't listen to them. We got our directions, we got bundled up, we had about 10 layers on, so we thought we were pretty warm. And they said the visitor center was 5 minutes away. Well, we started walking and walking and walking, and pretty soon it was like 15, 20 minutes. We were getting a little cold. And we figured we were lost. We couldn't even figure out how to get back to the hotel. So we were not panicked, but we were a little leery because there was absolutely nobody outside to help us. There were no cars, there were no office buildings open that we could walk into, there were no people walking. We were by ourselves in this minus 55-degree weather. Finally, we did see it after about 20 minutes. We saw a woman-owned print shop. We went and banged on their door, and when they saw that we were freezing out there, they let us in. And they wouldn't let us back out again until we were totally warm. They fed us hot chocolate tea. Glenn had a good time playing with the dog. And finally they said, you know what, you really are only about a half a block from the visitor center. They gave us directions and they watched us walk to make sure we got there. So we did get there, and this was the entrance to the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center.
This arch is made from moose antlers. I guess you can see that. If you've ever been to the arch in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, they have a very similar one, except it's made with elk antlers. So I don't know if some of you may have seen that. It's the same idea, but they use different antlers. And this was the entrance to the Morris Thompson Cultural Visitor Center.
Okay, and Ray, you asked about the ice fog. Well, this was ice fog in the back on the other side of the arch. And when we left, like I said, we only had 3 or 4 minutes to get back to the hotel. But we had to be very careful because the Chena River was right there. And we had to make sure that we didn't step off the snow-covered path and go into the, well, of course it was frozen solid, but the Chena River.
Okay, so now we're inside the visitor center, cultural center. This is not a real person, this is a cardboard cutout, but they redo the sign every day. And sunset that day was 4:32 p.m. And it was 6 minutes and 42 seconds later than it had been the day before. Give you a brief idea of where we stand in the north latitudes. The Fairbanks is about 65 degrees north latitude. The Arctic Circle is 66 2/3 about north latitude. The Arctic Circle is where in the winter, December 21st, you get 24 straight hours of no sunlight. And in June 21st, at the summer solstice, you get 24 hours. So we weren't quite that high. We were about 90 miles-ish south of there. So Fairbanks didn't get it completely dark or completely light. But you can see that the change out there is 6 minutes and 42 seconds a day. So in about maybe about 8 days, a week or so, you'll actually gain an hour. Whereas in Pittsburgh, since we're nowhere near the north latitudes, we may gain at that time of year maybe a minute a day. So it could take 40, 50, 60 minutes, or 40, 50, 60 days to get an extra hour. But here it only takes like 5 or 6 or 7 days. I haven't worked out the numbers, but we were up pretty close to the Arctic Circle.
Okay. So, afternoon, driver picked us up at 3:30, and now we're going to head from Fairbanks up to Chena Hot Springs, the Chena River recreational area. And just to say, when I said we were off the grid, 64 miles northeast of Fairbanks is where the road actually stops. And you can see this, the road, Chena River recreational area, that is the end of the road in Alaska. And that's where we went. and the road going up 64 miles was 2 lanes, one either way, totally snow-covered. Driver regaled us with lots of stories about her back and forth trips. Over 20 years she made that trip, back and forth from Fairbanks to Chena. And Glenn, you were going to talk about this.
Yeah, it's cut off in the bottom, but that really says North Pole. Okay, 7 miles. It's not the actual North Pole, but it's a town named North Pole. And you may have heard of it because people can write a letter from Santa Claus to their children and send it to North Pole, Alaska. North Pole will take the letter, stamp it, North Pole, and send it back to the kids. So they're delighted to get a letter from Santa postmarked at the North Pole. That was about 7 miles south of where we were. We didn't have a vehicle. I guess we could take the Uber driver.
We could have taken the Uber driver, but we didn't. But okay, so let's go to Chena. Let's go to the north, Chena Hot Springs Resort. And when you hear resort, forget what the word resort means. This was very, very rustic. We stayed at the Moose Lodge with a real life-size stuffed moose in our lobby. The off-site cabins did not have indoor plumbing. Can you imagine what they felt like when they went out to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night at minus 55 degrees? The activities on here, the snowflake activities, were the winter activities. We decided we were too cold for ice fishing. We felt we were too old for the snowmobile or the cross-country skiing. 10 years ago we might have done it, but we didn't. So what we did is the Ice Museum, the dog kennel tours, and of course the Northern Lights, and we'll show you some of those pictures later. But I think we should really go to, here, first of all, this is what the inside of the cabins looked like, the lodge looked like. It was extremely rustic, and the entire lodge, everywhere, looked exactly like this, very rugged. This is where we had breakfast, lunch, dinner. The bar was right there. And as you can see, this is us having breakfast. And if you look out the window, you can see that it's still dark outside, about 9:30, 10:15. And the first night we were there, we went in and pretty hungry, and went in and they said clam chowder. I thought New England clam chowder. Well, they said, do you want small, medium, or large? I said large. Well, large came out like quite large. Glenn and I together could not finish the clam chowder, but it was good. And kind of the routine was breakfast, lunch, dinner right here in this room, and an extension. Breakfast was usually around 9:30, still dark outside. And between 10 and 4, you did some of the activities, and we took lots of naps during the day. 4 to 6 was dinner, and after dinner, are you ready for this? We took naps every night from around 6 until about 9:30. Why? Because at 9:30 we met in the activity room for the road up the mountain to see the Northern Lights. And this trip up the mountain to see the Northern Lights to Charlie's Dome was about a half hour on snow-covered roads, very dark, black, with just snow-covered trees on either side. And how did we get to the top of the mountain? Glenn's going to tell you.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a road, really, more a path. But this is what we rode in. This is a snow coach. It's got treads on it, like maybe a military tank, although these were plastic, not steel. And this is the trailer. It's attached to this. Donna and I were about the oldest people there, so the crew...
We're always the oldest people on the trips.
The crew, which was Ukrainian, Vladimir was our driver. He took pity on us and put us up in the main vehicle, the one that was actually, powered, and it had heat, whereas the trailer didn't have heat. It held about, 10 or 12 people, whoever could squeeze in. And they had no view except out these little side windows when it was dark, so they had nothing to see. But we, since we were sitting up here, could see out the front window and where Vladimir was taking us. So there were 3 of these sets, and about 9:45, they got everybody in, and up we went up Charlie's Dome. It took about, 35 minutes to get...
Roughly 35 minutes, yes.
I should tell him now. Yeah, it took him about 15 minutes to get back down. It was 2:30 in the morning. He wanted to go to bed, and he just, we were bouncing all over the place.
So we're at Charlie's Dome, and everybody has asked me what I thought of the trip, and excuse me, I said it was magical. Magical? Excuse me, here's where the magic came in. We got out of the snow coach, and this is the view we got to see. It was just, we couldn't even explain it. It was just so beautiful. Totally black sky at first, snow-covered trees. It almost looks like our fake white Christmas trees that we see here in Pittsburgh, but these were real, coated with inches and inches of ice frozen snow. No sound at all, except the scrunching of the boots as we got out of the snow coach and walked on the snow. And the snow was high, but it was packed. And we had to go into a yurt. So I have lots of pictures of each night getting out of the snow coach and seeing this beautiful, beautiful. I just wish I could show you and have you hear the silence that we had. But it was, here's another couple of pictures. And it was all around us, all 180 degrees around us.
As we got out of the coach or the trailer and the other people's, the trees and with their flashes, so you can see that they were all lit up light, but they kind of blurred out the stars. You could see them up there because these trees were smaller, but you couldn't see the stars in the other picture because of the flashes. And it didn't take us too long to figure out we can't use flash photography if we're trying to get pictures of the Northern Lights. So everybody had to turn their flashes on. You can see a little bit of the Northern Lights in the background here, but not particularly stunning at this point.
So this is the yurt. And here's the routine once we got up on the top of Charlie's Dome. We would spend time inside the yurt warming up. The yurt held about 30 to 40 people each night, and there were 2 to 3 yurts spaced out on the top of the mountain. And basically, the yurt was a warming hut. And this, I have to say, this is not one of our photos. This is the only one that's not one of our photos. We forgot to take a picture of the dome, so I got this off the Chino website. But our routine was 20 to 25 minutes warming up inside the yurt. Vladimir and his family and the crew had hot chocolate iced tea, or hot tea, hot chocolate, coffee, snacks, chicken soup, and there was a fire pit in there where we could warm up. And we would warm up, warm our hands, get ready, talk to each other, learn how to take pictures of the Northern Lights. And Glenn, you have a funny story about your...
That was that funny.
Glenn is a photographer.
Yeah, well, I had a really good camera and a reasonably good camera, and I spent quite a bit of time fiddling with all your controls trying to get pictures of the Northern Lights, and I got nothing. Just snapped it, long exposures, everything else I tried. Meanwhile, there's Donna with her iPhone 15 getting these beautiful pictures. So I finally just put the cameras away, picked up my iPhone 11, and I got a few pictures also.
Right.
You don't pay attention to the fact that if you're standing there with gloves and mittens on, you can't work your camera. Just no way. So we go back in. Oh, they had sent somebody up about 2 hours before to build a fire in the wood-burning stove to keep the yurt warm. So when you get in there, you spend about 20, 25 minutes warming your fingers. You rush out, you get about 5 minutes to take pictures with your bare hands, and then you rush back in and repeat and repeat. That was the only way we could get pictures.
So this is the way we looked on the 5 minutes we were outside. And keep in mind, if down at the resort it was minus 55, we don't know how cold it was on the top of the mountain because it was wide open. So this is the way we looked outside with all our layers and layers. And how did we take pictures? We very quickly took off our gloves. We actually posed looked at the lights, took the gloves off, took the picture, put the gloves back on, went back inside. So that was the routine from 10 o'clock at night until 2:30 in the morning, or until we were all so cold and tired, we said, let's go home. I think this is going to be our Christmas card for Christmas this year.
Looks like us, doesn't it?
Okay, so here are some pictures of the Northern Lights. I'm just going to let you look at them for a few minutes. And you can see down here at the lower left-hand corner, that's not the ground. That's the blue and purple that Glenn showed you in that picture earlier from the museum. And then you see the green, and what is above the green is kind of the red that was shown.
I don't see it.
Well, you don't only know 3 or 4 colors, Glenn. I can see red, maybe you cannot. And the stars were just magnificent, thousands and thousands of stars. You could see every constellation. Oops, wait, wrong way. This, I think, is probably the best of the best pictures that we took. And this one showed the green, the Northern Lights as a vertical rather than the horizontal. And you notice the little white squiggly lines in the picture? We did not see that with our naked eyes. That is, we were told, it's the Elon Musk satellite debris. You'll see it in many of the pictures. It's a Starlink network satellite. And when I was in, where was it? Voyagers National Park in September, we saw some Northern Lights there also, and we saw the same little squiggly light lines in there, and the pictures, not with the human eye. And some of the lights were moving. You could just, it wasn't static like you see on the picture here. It really was moving.
These pictures are taken over 2 nights. We've got them all mixed together, so I can't tell you which picture came from which night, but that's okay.
And again, the photographs don't show you the brilliance and the stars. It's just amazing. Those are our Northern Lights pictures.
Beautiful.
So what else did we do during the day from 10 to 4? Well, the one day we did the dog sled and kennel tour. And Glenn's going to talk about this one because I almost couldn't get him away, and we almost brought a dog home with us. So Glenn, tell us about the dog sled.
Yeah, these are the dog sled dogs. Most of them are not huskies like you used to see on Yukon King in the television show on Saturday mornings. Huskies are not really very fast, and they tire out easily, so almost all the dogs are crossbreeds of different kinds. They're trying to get maximum speed, maximum strength, able to withstand the elements. So they line them up on there. There were 2 sleds here, and they would give rides. The sleds held 4 people, so there were 4 people getting on this one, and another sled, well, it's back here, but we were the last ones of the day, so we got only the 2 of us on the sled, so the dogs had a bit of a lighter load. Over here is the dog kennels. There's about a
On the left.
On the left, yes. There's about a 6 or 8 foot chain that they put in the ground, and the dogs have like a 6 foot, or I'm sorry, 12 foot or a 16 foot diameter they can run around in. And there's boxes there. There's box, and there's box. And that's where the dogs live, and they don't come indoors at all. There's straw in those boxes, and that's where they spend the night. And they own that little circle. They're set up so that none of the circles intersect, so the dogs can't interact with each other. They just stay there in their area. And we were allowed to walk through, and some of them were very friendly and came up, and other ones cowered back in their boxes. So,
And somebody asked us the last time, are they all Huskies? And they aren't. And they had the dogs for adoption on the one side.
oh, that's over here on the right.
That's over there on the right, which you can't see. And that's where I thought Glenn was going to take one of those adopted dogs. And they said not everybody's suited to be a sled dog. And this picture is they were getting ready to go. And if you knew that if they were ready to go for the dog sled ride, and how could you tell?
Barking?
What?
We hear.
Can you hear it? Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you hear the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, makes a big deal about how they force the dogs to pull sleds in this freezing cold temperature and how we're cruel. And you just have to see these dogs. They live to run. They want to run. The one sled took off, and the dogs that were left behind in the second were complaining and barking. They wanted to go with the first set of dogs. So the dogs don't mind it. I mean, they don't treat them badly. The dogs that don't have the need or the want to pull, they put them aside and let people adopt them. They don't force them to do it. But the dogs that are there, they just love. You can tell just looking at them. If you know anything about dogs, these dogs love to do this.
And so what did we see when we actually went on the dog sled ride? And what was so amazing is you heard the way they sounded before we took off. Once we got out into the nature with the dogs, they didn't bark, they just went. And this was some of the scenery that we saw when we went out on the dog sled ride. Just so peaceful and quiet and beautiful. We were actually able to take some pictures while we were on the sled. Okay. So, once we did that, what else did we do? Remember, we were at Gina Hot Springs. So here we are, braving, getting ready, building up courage to take off all our many layers of clothes, put on a skimpy bathing suit, and go into the hot springs.
This is not a lounging by the pool in the
Yes. So here are some of the pictures of outside. We took pictures all around the hot springs before we went and put our bathing suits on.
The hot spring, the water coming in was 107 degrees Fahrenheit. It mixed in with the water, and the average temperature in the spring itself was 104. So all the steam is coming up. It's hitting the buildings that are down to so it sticks to them, forms a layer of ice, more steam, more ice. The outside of the building had 8 inches of ice piled up on it, just from the way all the steam was coming off and interacting.
And you can see in the upper left, the upper corner here, the upper part of it, this is the actual hot springs. And again, we're taking the pictures from outside. We hadn't built up enough courage yet to go in. Until now.
There's people.
There you can see, Glenn, you can see those are people inside the springs. And in the upper left-hand corner, Glenn, are you pointing to it?
Yeah, that's the walkway.
We went ahead, we got into our bathing suits. You don't take a towel, nothing, just your bathing suit. And you walk down this walkway in the upper left-hand corner. It's open, and as you're getting down there, it's getting colder and colder and colder. And once you get to the bottom, you have exactly 3 seconds to jump into the hot springs and dump yourself under, totally immerse yourself in the springs. And you're supposed to stay under for about 10 seconds, which we did. Came up, and this is one of my regrets, we didn't get a picture of Glenn and I getting out, lifting up out of the hot springs, because our hair was straight up, totally frozen. And several times I asked Glenn, please go out, get your camera, and come back in. He was not about to
Once
get
I
out.
get out, I wouldn't come back in.
So he lasted about 20 minutes in the hot springs. I lasted about 30, 35 minutes, and I thought, I think it's time to get out again. And I think that's another regret that we didn't go back another day. But it was just a different experience. I loved it.
And we got to intermingle with a bunch of other people in the pool and talk about them and where they came from. There was an Oriental couple, I don't remember where they came
Right.
from. And I don't remember where they were. They were from Alaska somewhere, but for their anniversary every year, they came and went in the hot springs.
So what else did we do? They also had, we said it was off the grid. There was greenhouses and geothermal tours that Glenn went on to.
Yes, the whole thing is run by the hot water coming out of the ground. It's off the grid with a little asterisk on it. They use the hot water to make their electricity, to heat their buildings, to heat their greenhouse. They have a whole geothermal thing, but the woman that led the tour did not know anywhere near what I needed as an engineer to know how things work. Well, that's the machine that pumps the hot water up, and that's the machine that turns to make electricity. And so I was trying to ask questions, and she didn't know the answer, so I don't have any more information about that, or any pictures for that matter. But we did go over to the greenhouse, and they grow, this is, way up, a little bit even northeast of Fairbanks. They grow their own lettuce, they grow their own tomatoes. We had it every day for meals, a few other things they grew, but mostly lettuce and tomatoes that were growing in greenhouses right up there when it was 55 degrees outside. So it was nice to have fresh salad every day.
Okay, the last thing we did before we left was, of course, go to the Ice Museum. The Ice Museum we heard a lot about before we got there, and Glenn?
Oh yeah, this museum is there 365 days a year. The inside is kept at 22 degrees Fahrenheit. During the summer, they have pegs on the wall with coats so people can come in from 65, 70 degrees outside, and they're freezing because it's 22 and they put these heavy coats on. We, on the other hand, walked in from minus 50 something and started taking our coats off. It was just so warm in there. It was way up to 22 degrees. So we tried to get some pictures, but it was all ice. Everything, they have ice sculptures, they have ice walls, they have ice bars. And if you took a picture with a flash, it would just bright, everything would just bright. You couldn't see anything. So we were shooting without flash.
And you notice the picture on the right is the ice bar. And even though the bar stools were made of ice, they did have felt covers on it, so we could sit down when we had our appletinis at the very end of the tour. And of course the appletinis were in, obviously, an ice glass. And the guide at the very end went in, got his lathe, and he showed us how they do carve the ice. And he made this glass cup, gave it to me as a souvenir. And I took it back and I said, well, I can't take it in the room. So we put it outside on the ledge, and it was still there when we left, because I figured, can't take it on the airplane, it would totally be defrosted by the time I got home. So I have a picture of a souvenir.
Yeah, nobody steals those glasses.
So last but not least, most of you know that Glenn is a master birder. And we can't take any trip anywhere in the world without him finding a life bird or something. So we saw a couple of birds that Glenn's going to talk to you about.
Oh, it really didn't get, it's kind of out of focus. But anyway, that's a pine grosbeak. I had never seen a pine grosbeak in my entire life, so it was a life bird. We have a rose-breasted grosbeak here in Pennsylvania. I've seen them around Masonic property, but it never gets as far north as Alaska, and the pine grosbeaks never get this far south. So this is a pine grosbeak, a life bird for me. When we got there, there was a list of birds in the activity center that had been seen on Chena Hot Springs property. There were 11. By the time I left, It was at 13, I added to the list. I'll get to that in a minute. Now we saw red poles, which I'd seen before. A little bit of red on the head here. They're about the size of a sparrow, and they're all fluffed up because it was cold, and they were eating seeds that had been falling off of some kind of a spruce or a pine tree. And also we saw ravens all over the place. We saw them in Fairbanks, we saw them on the drive up, and we saw a lot of them around the dog kennel because they knew when the people came out in the morning and set the food down, if the dogs didn't get to it quick, the ravens were going to swoop in and get a bite. So there were a couple of dozen at least in all the trees around there. But this was one of the ones that really surprised me. This is negative 55 degrees. All the water, all the streams should be frozen, but this one wasn't. I was kind of surprised at it at first until I realized that it's just past the outlet from the hot springs. So the hot springs are run into this, and it keeps this water from freezing. Probably half a mile downstream it refroze, and that was it. But given that, a particular kind of a bird could live in this environment. They're called dippers. I've seen them in Colorado, I've seen them in Wyoming. Didn't expect to see one in Alaska because the water would have been frozen. Dippers live alongside mountain streams, and they literally jump in, go under the water to feed on little macroinvertebrates there. And darn if I didn't see one. There's the same one, but I tried to get pictures of it. This is from my book, Dark Gray Dipper, and that's what you're looking at, a little bit smaller than a robin. And he was jumping in the water, going under. He couldn't do that downstream because it would have been frozen. Probably it's one of the few places in Alaska that a dipper could live because all year it keeps running. It doesn't freeze over. So dipper is one of the ones I added to the list at Chena Hot Springs. So that's about it for my birds.
Okay, so Glenn looked at the birds and the animals. I talked to the people. And the one thing I take from the trip to Alaska, and Glenn's been there 5 times, I've been there 3 times. I love the people in Alaska, both summer and winter when we were there both times. I ask everybody, why are you there? Why did you come? And over and over and over again, the people say, it's just a unique place to live. I came because of a boyfriend, I came because of college, I came because of the service, and I just couldn't leave. We loved the people in Alaska. So heading home from our magical sojourn off the grid, we finally did see a moose on the way back down into Fairbanks. And our driver told us took us to a place, campgrounds, where they were having the ice sculpture exhibition from people coming from all over the world. I wish we could have stayed another day just to see it, but we didn't. So that's our trip. So questions, comments, anything you'd like to ask? The lights, that was just keeping them.
Were they sunlight?
They're like fluorescent light.
Yeah, they might be because there's very little sunlight, and so they probably were artificial lights tuned to the same frequencies that sunlight is. That's a good question. I didn't think. Yeah, but literally, when you only have 4 or 6 hours of sunlight a day, you got to do something. You fasted, by the way.
If you adopted a dog, how would you get it back to Pittsburgh?
Great question.
Hook it to a sled and take off. No, I wasn't really going to adopt. River would have liked it. This dog is about 6 times his size.
Okay. I can't find it now.
It was right before this one.
Right before that one? Okay.
Yeah, right
There we go.
See in the left hand.
Right.
One of those lights at
Yeah,
the
those are
top.
all sunlight imitating fluorescent lights. Is this still working? Yeah, it sounds like it is.
Are they not visible now, the northern lights up there?
Not so well because it's too light.
Too bright.
It'll be too bright, yeah, they're probably up to,
Usually from November until the middle of March, middle of April is the time you can see northern lights in Alaska.
I have a question. The hot water springs geothermal, I mean, where does that, how does the water get so heated? Is it because of comes from the Earth's core, it's heated and comes up?
somewhere down
Sounds
there,
like
yes,
it just comes from
it's,
from the middle part of
it
the
would-
Earth. and
water would
Somehow makes its way up.
percolate down to where there's maybe magma or something
Oh, okay.
down lower, and then warm up and be pumped back up.
Okay.
Great question,
It's
thank you.
not, it's not done by people, it's automatic.
There's no heaters.
No,
The
Right.
University of Pittsburgh Learning Center is taking a trip to Finland this coming winter to see the northern lights. Now, is there any difference in our part of the world versus?
I can answer that.
Repeat the question.
Repeat the question, okay. There's a group going to Finland, and you want to know if the northern lights are different in Finland as opposed to Alaska. I have a friend who went to Norway, and she showed me some of her pictures. They were very similar. Some of them are photoshopped that you see in the magazines, but depending on the time of the year and where they are, and you're in the right place at the right time, you see the brilliance of the northern lights. Another couple were in Iceland, and they saw very similar to what we saw. Good question.
Who goes to Iceland in the winter, though? You can only get flights there in July and August.
We almost did. We could have. That was one of our locations when we decided to go to Alaska. Great, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.